I was able to, discover her work email based off of just, having the naming convention in her name, her full name. I spoofed an email to both of her addresses, informing her that her scheduled maintenance on her new Ford Bronco was coming up. And that was a malicious link that I put in the email. And when she clicked that link, I had access to her machine.
Welcome to the DevSec for Scale podcast, the show that makes security a first-class citizen for growing companies. My name is Jeremy Hess, Head of Developer Relations at Achilles, the secrets management SaaS platform. This interview podcast brings security experts and practitioners together to offer practical and actionable ways for small and growing companies to implement security best practices using shift-left principles without interrupting developer life cycles. Welcome back, everybody, to the DevSec for Scale podcast. My name is Jeremy Hess from Achilles, and today with me is Nick DiPasquale. Nick and I met through Slack, of all places, through one of the cybersecurity channels. Nick, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me. And we're actually going to talk about a topic that I haven't spoken about to anyone for this podcast, and I actually really haven't spoken about any time in my career. So it's really, we're going to buckle ourselves in for this ride. Should be interesting. And before we get into a little bit more about you, your background, and what you're doing today, let's just get right into it. So the first question, spicing things up, what would you say are the most common attack vectors that you see today with everything being connected?
It's still people, and I think it's going to be people for the foreseeable future. You and I were speaking about this show, and how you can have the most mature security posture, the most secure or mature tech stack in the world within your security program, but wrapping compensating controls around people is always going to be an issue.
Absolutely. We're going to dig more into that a little bit later. And so let's get a little more about you. Can you give us, just some of your background and what you're doing today?
Sure. There's about a million and one different ways you can find your way working in the security field. That came in through a sysadmin and then a systems engineering DevOps route. Always been kind of focused on the infrastructure side and then moving over towards like the cloud, more DevOps automation focused. And then just kind of fell into it, which is, I think, the way most people fall into security. I always had a passion for it. Always knew it was something I wanted to do. But the fact that I get to do what I do every day for work, it's a gift.
That's great. Fantastic. And tell us a little bit about your current role. What are some of the things that are, that interest you today that you're working on?
Always been focused on open source intelligence. To me, it's just been super fascinating. Being able to just comb for data that people just willingly give up, right? Whether it's blog posts, Twitter posts, Reddit, license plate numbers, anything. It's always just fascinated me how much data you can gather and start tying points together, whether it be for, the reconnaissance phase of a red team engagement or, identifying a threat actor or actively going out and procuring threat intelligence rather than just waiting for threat intel to come to you through indicators of compromise or anything. But at Benbrook, we really focusing on MDR. We developed our own MDR, and then recently launched a new service framework for what we're calling Bodyguard, which is a way to protect the human element when you leave the office and leave the bounds of those corporate protections in that security stack.
Yeah, great stuff. So, being that we're talking about, a more human issue, not necessarily an automation issue or anything like that, what do you think developers can generally do to ensure that they and their teams don't allow an attacker to just, gain access to their networks from that human side?
Yeah, that's this question or this scenario in general is an interesting blend of a technical problem and a technical solution. and a human problem and a human solution. Being aware of what you're developing, the code you're writing, where you're storing those secrets, any controls within that CI/CD pipeline, not putting secrets directly in plain text in your code, or subsequently in a GitHub repo that may or may not be public. I think we've all seen that whoopsie moment, right? So just being aware of your surroundings and having that culture of security, right? That you really drive from the top down within an organization. And that goes way deeper than just development too. It goes into emails. Everyone's super busy. So we get an email from someone who needs something urgently. You're doing everything in an urgent manner. You meet that need or make that request urgently. And then 4 hours later, when you calm down, you realize that you may have made a mistake. And that's how it happens usually. Yeah,
I was starting to get emails from my CEO that, he urgently needs my phone number. So,
or luckily, gift card.
One of those. Exactly. Yeah. So it's a tough world out there. And so in terms of, what we're talking about today and what's happening, it seems like there's issues, especially after COVID and all that, where a lot of people are more remote, right? So remote work is a big deal, obviously. And so actually, I spoke with in our first episode, Dr. Chase Cunningham, about a different topic, but he's obviously one of the most prolific advocates of zero trust. And, so how can organizations really enforce methods like zero trust, with the human element involved?
Man, that's the $1 million question is how are you how are you going to force the top down, or not forces? It sounds really forceful.
Enforce, maybe.
Enforce, right. It needs to be a culture shift that gets supported from the top down. And the issue that's always been existent with security is the more secure an environment is, the less convenient it is. So how do you adopt these practices within your organization to ensure that security without inconveniencing your people on a daily basis when they're just trying to go through their daily lives at work and just through some workflow that pertains to their role? I think it becomes a technical solutions issue along with a support issue. And when I say support, I don't mean like a technical support. I mean like a cultural support within the organization as a whole. How do you implement these solutions without inconveniencing your workers to a certain extent? I think any adoption of a broad security policy or a model is going to introduce some sort of inconvenience, so to speak. So, how do you do that without making people's lives not terrible, but letting them go through their job in a manner that improves that posture overall, but without making them authenticate 15 to 20 times per day.
Well, where do you have, what are you seeing in terms of actual real world zero trust? I mean, are you finding that things are generally okay, or are you seeing that there are too many holes to be poked?
Too many holes to be poked when it pertains to zero trust in general, or just the state of security in general?
I'd say with let's go with both. Let's start with security in general, and then specific to zero trust.
Well, I would say for the state of security in general, the majority of the same vectors still exist. And those, again, are the human unpatched systems and people just, leaving secrets in the open. We're just doing something that they're not particularly aware of from a workflow perspective, essentially on accident. Humans will always make errors. From a zero trust perspective, I think that there's great solutions out there, and there's a great way to implement them and deploy them. But without that support from the top down and that support of making that cultural shift, it's hard to implement, especially because you're going to have that pushback. You're going to have someone who may or may not, be willing to deploy an agent to their laptop if it's BYOD, or if you put too much enforcement on an endpoint, you run the risk of them kind of doing quasi BYOD to get around the inconvenience. So it's a hard problem to solve, and I think it takes buy-in across the board.
I feel like that's also another thing you just mentioned is, the idea that people will find their own workarounds for different things. I know I have spoken to people as well that say things like, I actually still have, admin privileges on certain accounts. I left the company 3 months ago, and they never took me, my account off of, this and this app. So I actually still have, admin rights to it. And I just think to myself, how do you miss that kind of stuff?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that really comes down to like that's like an onion, right? There's a lot of layers to that situation. It's an account lifecycle management problem. It's an HR process problem, onboarding and offboarding, and we can probably have a whole other episode on identity and access management. Like it is a bear.
Absolutely. So what I really wanted to get, because we're talking about human cases, there's always, I'm sure, some interesting, maybe slightly embarrassing, real story that you probably have. So is there any, use case that you could share with us that happened, whether it was with you, a client, or anything else?
Yeah, had an interesting engagement a while back, and out of respect for, the customer and the folks involved within that organization, we're not going to say who they were specifically, but it paints a good picture. So I was brought in to assist in a red team exercise, and I was coming in from a reconnaissance perspective. So I started building a persona and just a profile on the company. Using open source intelligence to build that profile, I was searching satellite imagery, looking at access roads around the property, identifying if they had any security cameras outside the building in the parking lot, identifying physical entrances, and then starting to build employee profiles and personas that were high enough value to go after, but not technical in nature. And ideally, when I'm doing these things, I want to focus on a more busy person. And who's the most busy group within any organization? It's probably your sales folks. Maybe finance, marketing, HR, depending on the time of year. I'm even maybe like office admin, right? They're usually pretty busy, but in this case, I opted to focus on someone in sales. And when I started digging into this particular individual, and for the sake of this conversation, we'll call her Becky. She was a senior vice president of sales at this organization, and Becky was a overshare and frequent poster on social media, and she was married to a gentleman, we'll call him Bob. They had 3 children. They had a golden retriever. And I'm going through a list of just stuff that I put together. They lived here in my area in Texas. She went to Harvard Business School. She recently bought a new vehicle, which was a new Ford Bronco. I was a little jealous on that one. I really want a Bronco. Going through social media, I was also able to see the trend for the past few years. It seems like they went on a family vacation to St. Lucia. So I'm able to go through these information sources that are publicly available, and at the surface seem harmless. But if I was a bad actor, I can map out your schedule, your life, just things that are important to you. And there's a lot of risk from that on multiple levels. Husband's name, kid's name, mom's name, dad's name, birthdays, things that are important. So you can start to develop like a word list, and use that list to potentially guess a password, right? That's one thing you can do. But in addition to gathering all that information, what I did was just parked outside their office and just sat there. And sitting in their parking lot, you're able to determine a rough timeline of when they come and go over the course of a day, maybe identify what days over a pattern, if they work from home, or maybe you're able to identify that she hadn't shown up since, Wednesday, but she showed up Monday. So maybe she was on vacation. Maybe that coincides with a social media post about somewhere she went that weekend. Then you can, discern she probably was on vacation. And then by knowing a home address from, available data sources, like whether it be a license plate, or being able to determine like GPS coordinates from a photo, you can really pivot and start to gather information on the home, and which is scary, but if you were a bad actor, these are things that you can leverage. So I was able to discover her work email based off of just having the naming convention and her name, her full name. I spoofed an email to both of her addresses, informing her that her scheduled maintenance on her new Ford Bronco was coming up. And that was a malicious link that I put in the email. And when she clicked that link, I had access to her machine. And that's it. And while I was only brought in to do the reconnaissance phase and intelligence gathering, this was a great exercise in just how much can go wrong with what you share, right? And it's it's partly a psychology issue. You get something new that you're proud of. You want to show the world. You worked hard for it. I get it. I do the same thing. I'm guilty. But you can leverage these things to gain information about people. And if you were truly a bad actor, you can use it to exploit them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not just the basic spam we all get. It's when you put a personal detail there that there's no way some Nigerian prince knew, about some recent purchase or some vacation that you just took. But you add that little touch in, people really kind of let their guard down, it seems.
Yeah. If you can, if you're trying to gather information from someone, or if it's a target, obviously doing this in a legal manner, you're able to strike a chord, so to speak, and make that personal connection. And when you make that connection, there's a level of assumption that goes on their part. They assume, since their email address, in this case, what car they bought, that she's the one that bought that car. And in that email, I took a stock photo from Ford's website that was the same vehicle, the same color, the little like rendering of the vehicle.
Yep.
And you're able to make that connection. And like I said, there's an element of assumption that goes on, because you automatically think, okay, this person from this car dealership knows me. They have my email address. They know I bought this car there. They know my scheduled maintenance is coming up. I'm very busy. Of course, I'm going to click this link to schedule an appointment instead of calling or having them call me to confirm. So that moment of trust and assumption, just that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. So shifting gears just a little bit, and this is a question that I ask to all my guests. What are one or two tips that you would have for, I would say younger companies that are really just getting their security together, that, for their developers, that could help them prepare the organization for potential future, cyber attacks? Because obviously the startups, the younger companies, I'm not important enough for anyone to, as an attack, as a business, right? I'm just a small nothing. No one's going to try and hack me. So what are some, things that you could give, some tips for and some advice for them about how they could prepare, whether it's, automated, code-based, or human-based?
I think holistically, it's important to, especially from a security perspective, just since we're focusing on that topic, just because you're small doesn't mean you need to think like you're small and act like you're small. I think if you are a small shop and you're growing, you're scaling, and you're delivering, product, it's important to think like you're further down the line. It's important to think and act like you're bigger than you are. to adopt these principles from the start. The worst thing, and I've seen it time and time again from clients of mine or from just roles that I've worked in the past. Everyone is so focused from the start on building product and delivering and shipping code and marketing that they overlook security. And then they get to like a Series B, Series C, Series whatever funding, and they're starting to think about security because clients are asking about it, customers are asking about it, investors are asking about it, and now you're at this point where you're like, oh crap, I need to play some catch up. And now you're talking about a major, excuse me, a major cultural shift that needs to happen, and you're trying to backdate all of that and just shoehorn these compensated controls and technical solutions into a workflow that's existed for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So you have a full staff who is used to working in this manner, and you have a tech stack within your organization that's people aren't used to those controls and policies and procedures. So I kind of relate it to building a foundation. You're part of that foundation is that CI/CD pipeline. It's that development workflow. And part of that foundation also needs to be those security practices, because it's like I said, time and time again, you end up in that playing catch-up mode, and it's not the right time to do it. It never works out the way it should, and it's always a moving target. And security is a moving target anyways. So, let's not make this the problem any worse than it already is. Start thinking about these things from the start. Start implementing these controls, those policies, and those procedures, and that culture of security awareness from the start, and it will serve you very well in the future.
Absolutely. Everything from day zero is prevent 0 days by starting security at day zero, right?
Yeah. If you start all the way back, you can't go back further.
There you go. Awesome. Nick, thank you so much for your time. Learned a lot. Really interesting ideas to see, how cyber works from the human aspect. So thank you so much. And I hope that we speak again soon and look forward to it. So have a really good day.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Have a good one.